strong.
Imagine a massive warship, longer than a football field, bristling with antennas, radars, and weapons, and armed with more than 100 missiles capable of striking targets thousands of kilometers away. For decades, it stood as a floating fortress, a symbol of American power at sea, a silent witness to wars, crises, and rivalries across the globe. But today, its flag has been lowered for the very last time. The steel giant rests at the pier in Norfolk, Virginia. The United States Navy says goodbye to a legend. And yet, across the Pacific, a bold question is asked. Could this warship's story truly be over? Or could it find a second life, this time under the Philippine flag? On September 27, 2024, history was made at Naval Station Norfolk. Two great ships of the U.S. Navy were officially retired. USS Normandy, a Ticonderoga-class cruiser, and USS Ramage, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer. USS Normandy was commissioned in 1989, named after the Allied invasion of France in World War II, the famous D-Day landings at Normandy. For more than 3 decades, the cruiser lived up to that name, carrying forward a legacy of decisive battles and powerful presence. Measuring almost 173 meters in length and displacing over 9,600 tons, Normandy was one of the most powerful surface combatants in the world. At the heart of her power was the Mk-41 vertical launch system. With 122 missile cells, she could unleash Tomahawk cruise missiles against land targets, Standard missiles against aircraft and ballistic missiles, and even rocket-propelled torpedoes against submarines. Backed by the advanced Aegis combat system, Normandy was built not just to fight, she was built to dominate. Her combat record tells the story. During the Gulf War in 1991, USS Normandy played a pivotal role, launching Tomahawk missiles against Iraqi targets. She later deployed multiple times to the Middle East, supporting operations in Iraq, Afghanistan, and against ISIS. Normandy also patrolled in the Mediterranean and the Atlantic, standing guard in strategic choke points and disputed waters. To America's allies, she was reassurance. To adversaries, she was a warning. USS Ramage, the destroyer retired alongside Normandy, was no less significant. As an Arleigh Burke-class ship, she carried 90 missile cells and the same Aegis combat system, serving as a frontline defender of aircraft carriers and amphibious groups. Together, Normandy and Ramage represented the muscle of the U.S. surface fleet during the 1990s and 2000s. But nothing lasts forever. Rising costs, the age of the ships, and a shift toward newer, more efficient vessels forced the Navy's hand. Cruisers like Normandy, despite their immense firepower, are now being phased out. For the U.S. Navy, the future lies in newer destroyers, stealthier frigates, and unmanned systems. Yet, as the Navy lowers the curtain on these giants, debate has sparked in Washington. Some lawmakers are asking, why scrap ships with so much firepower when America's allies desperately need stronger fleets? Wouldn't it make sense to transfer them to partners, countries like the Philippines, Vietnam, or smaller NATO states, who face real threats at sea? This is where speculation turns toward Manila. After all, the Philippines has received U.S. ships before. The Hamilton-class cutters, now BRP Gregorio del Pilar, BRP Ramon Alcaraz, and BRP Andres Bonifacio, were all transferred from the U.S. Coast Guard. Though old, they still serve as vital patrol ships in the West Philippine Sea. Now imagine, instead of a cutter, the Philippines receiving a warship like Normandy. It would be a seismic leap. The country's most advanced ships today, the Jose Rizal-class frigates, carry only 16 vertical launch cells. Normandy has 122. That is more than 7 times the firepower, an instant transformation from a modest fleet into a regional heavyweight. Picture it. Normandy repainted in Philippine colors, sailing beside BRP Jose Rizal and BRP Antonio Luna, bristling with missiles. It would send shockwaves across Asia. For a nation often described as having a navy too small for its vast maritime territory, acquiring a Ticonderoga cruiser would be like suddenly jumping several weight classes overnight. But then, reality steps in, and it is harsh. Operating a cruiser like Normandy is not just about sailing it. It means paying hundreds of millions of dollars every year in fuel, spare parts, training, and advanced maintenance. It requires over 300 highly trained sailors, supported by a complex supply chain. The Philippine Navy, still struggling to expand and modernize, would find this almost impossible to sustain. The warning signs are already there. Even the Hamilton-class cutters, smaller, simpler ships, proved to be costly and challenging to maintain. Upgrading them with new radar and weapons stretched resources. If the cutters were a challenge, imagine the burden of keeping a cruiser like Normandy combat ready. Without guaranteed American funding, spare parts, and technical support, the Normandy could easily become a floating liability, an impressive-looking symbol that drains the budget instead of strengthening defenses. That's why many analysts argue a more realistic option would be older Arleigh Burke destroyers or additional Hamilton cutters, or new offshore patrol vessels that are easier to maintain. These ships, while less dramatic, fit more naturally within the Philippine Navy's current capacity. And yet, the idea of Normandy cannot be dismissed so easily, because behind it lies a greater truth. Washington knows that allies like the Philippines need more power at sea. With China growing more aggressive in the South China Sea and Filipino vessels harassed on a regular basis, the need for stronger ships is no longer a distant dream, it is a survival requirement. So perhaps Normandy herself will never sail under the Philippine flag. But her retirement has sparked a conversation. How serious is America in backing its allies? Will it send them the tools to truly defend their waters? Or just words of support? For the Philippines, the message is clear. The era of small patrol boats and lightly armed frigates must end. Whether through donations of older U.S. ships or the purchase of new vessels from South Korea, Japan, or Europe, the Navy must grow stronger. The West Philippine Sea demands nothing less. The end of USS Normandy's service is not just the closing of a chapter in U.S. naval history. It is the opening of a debate about the future balance of power in Asia. And for the Philippines, the stakes are nothing less than national survival. So I leave the question to you. If offered, should the Philippines accept a massive ship like Normandy, despite the staggering costs of keeping her alive? Or should the country focus on building a sustainable, modern fleet that it can truly operate for decades to come? Because this is not just a story about one retired warship. It is a story about strategy, about sovereignty, and about the hard choices that will shape the future of the Philippine Navy in the South China Sea.